literature review, and many of you are in different stages of your reading, yeah, finding things, trying to understand the subject of your research, and also trying to find some materials, yeah, for your research. Okay, so there are many stages. Some of you have done quite a lot, but maybe some of you have just started, so you have not done much reading and you have yet to finalize your research area, okay, or the focus of your research. But anyway, I hope today's session on literature review will give you some um, information on what to expect when you are doing your literature review. Okay, so following from Dr. Ismail's lecture just now, so let's look at the types of literature review uh, that most PhD students, go through. The first one is what we call the scoping review. Okay, this is when at the beginning of your research, like Dr. Ismail said just now, you have some idea of what you want to do, but it's not focused yet. Okay, so you're looking at many sources, and you want to find maybe the gaps, or in fact, if you're looking at, for example, the example Dr. Ismail gave just now on COVID-19 and its impact on tourism industry. So maybe you want to see, okay, what are COVID-19 effects, okay, or things like that. So you need some clarification on definitions, on some concepts, okay. So this is what we call the scoping review, and I think even in this course, when you are, towards the end of the semester, you are asked to do a proposal, then, most of your proposal will be at this stage. You are trying, scoping, yeah? You are looking at some literature, yeah, but not extensive yet, okay? And the second one is the what we call literature review or narrative review. Or sometimes it's called traditional literature review. This is a chapter in a thesis or in your dissertation. It describes what are the related research, all the related researches that has been done in your field, in the specific area, okay, of what you want to find out in your research. Okay, so this is basically describing or looking at certain items. And if you Google up literature review, there are many ways you can write. Some are very descriptive, some are very detailed into the theoretical discussions and things like that. So it really depends on the types of research that you're doing. Okay. So I would like to think that there is no one particular template that will fit all. Yeah, even in our built environment research, there'll be, it will be very different. For example, somebody coming from planning, very and towards more like social research, trying to understand humans' behavior, how people behave in certain conditions in cities and things, as opposed to someone who's doing a very technical from, for example, building technology. Okay, so it's very different in terms of composition, in terms of arrangement, in terms of emphasis. So this is the ones that you need to discuss with your supervisor, yeah, in terms of the specific. Here, I think myself and Dr. Ismail, we're just going to give an introduction of what you can expect from literature review. Okay. And then the third one is what we call the critical review. This is a more detailed examination of the literature, and you need to compare and evaluate and do some critical analysis. Now, from my experience, I found that many students can write very well in terms of literature review, what these people say, what that person say, and so on. But at the end of the section that you're discussing, you need to critically assess what these people are saying. Okay, some of them agree with one another, like Dr. Ismail demonstrated just now. Some of the scholars or some studies, they have different opinions. Yeah, so then you have to synthesize all this. You have to look critically. You have to evaluate, and then you have to to give not your opinion. Sometimes uh, examiners are actually looking at, so what do you think from all these discussions? Yeah. So in the discourse, you need to at least synthesize. If you do not even give your own opinion, you need to synthesize what people are saying and critically assess. Okay, because this literature, the studies, some are very sound, some you get from maybe perhaps quite, I wouldn't say shabby, but you don't know the credibility of the research. Yeah, if they come from refereed journals, then you can, is a strong source. Yeah, but sometimes you have to rely on newspapers and unofficial publications and things like that. Okay, so you cannot give them all the same emphasis. Okay, so maybe you can use the newspaper sources as support, but not the main ones. So this is how you need to differentiate between different types of reviews, different types of sources, and which one are you going to give more emphasis? Okay, so it's not a simple cut and paste kind of job. Okay, so you as a researcher need to do critical thinking. Okay, and then the fourth one is what we call the conceptual review. So basically, you go through the articles and sources, books, and so on. And then you categorize according to concepts, themes, whatever. Yeah. And then you identify the current understanding of the research topic. Yeah. And how do you arrive at those understanding? And then you're trying to understand how different literature are connected. Okay. How do they relate to each other? So basically, it will give you quite a comprehensive picture of what the literatures are saying, okay, and how they are related. Okay, next letter is Maya. Okay, and these two are the more rigorous ones. Sometimes you will come across what we call the systematic review. The systematic review in some cases are very important, where, for example, where methodology and data are very important. For example, if you are taking, when scientists do their literature review, they want to see how many studies have done. For example, let's say they want to see, to do something on, some drugs and the effects on teenagers, for example. Okay, so this is a very focused research area. They have very specific questions. They have very structured questions, okay, to be answered. So what they do is that they look at previous studies, previous research, and they scrutinize the data that were used in those studies. They scrutinize the methodology that the researchers are doing. And this is very, very rigorous. Okay, so because you have very specific research questions with measurements, so this is a more vigorous. in our area, I think we can also use the systematic review, but you have to look at the, for example, you have specific questions, but maybe not to the, to the exact um, accuracy, okay, as the perhaps the engineers or the doctors are using, for example. Yeah. But we also can do the systematic review where we can when you already have, yes, certain questions that you want to be answered. Yeah. This is not part of the this is not your research objectives, yeah, not your research questions, but the questions for literature review. For example, in literature review, I want to find out about this, how many percent of people are saying this, how many percent, for example, the researchers that have been done before that agree with these views or something like that, So you have very specific target. Then you can use systematic review, okay? Because this is quite a very rigorous exercise, and then the quantitative or qualitative meta-analysis review. This is actually the part of a systematic review as well. It's just the method of condensing and making sense of a large body of research. So in quantitative, you will be using statistical analysis, statistical data. In qualitative research, which is more subjective, you'll be evaluating, you'll be interpreting, your data, okay, and then identifies new themes or concepts, okay. So these are basically the six types of literature review, and they are not mutually exclusive. Sometimes you can see the overlap. Sometimes you can use a directive, but other parts you can be a little bit critical. And for PhD level of literature review, you need to do the critical the synthesis of your literature reviews. Yeah, you need to be critical, and you need to have you need to be argumentative. So there is a point that you want to make. Yeah. So after all, anybody can do research. Yeah, but at PhD level, we want to look at the contribution of your research, and we would like to know what do you think about what people are saying, okay, about the topic, so that your research can add, to the discourse that people are, talking about in the field, okay. So this, whatever style you want to choose for your literature review, you need to be critical. Yeah, you need not you need to include the critical element. Yeah, in your literature review. That is very important. Okay, even if your supervisor overlook this, you might come across, the examiners who might pick on your literature review and ask your opinion on this. Because I think most students can read and understand very well, and they cut and paste, and then put that in your literatures. Okay, but that's not the point of literature review. We need to the examiners, the readers, we want to see your opinion. So how do you take this? How do you understand this? Okay, and it will also help in your research later on in formulating your theoretical framework, in formulating your conceptual framework. Okay, next, Ismail. So the purpose of literature review, like I mentioned just now, is to build an argument. Is not to build a library. Okay, if you just cut and paste, it's basically you putting up some sort of a library of an inventory of what people are saying in your research. Yeah, but what we are more interested in is the arguments. So what do you think? What what is your point? Okay, so that is basically the purpose of literature review. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so I will come uh, to discuss a little bit is about theory and also theoretical framework and conceptual framework. Okay, so what is a theory? It is actually a set of constructs. Sometimes we call it concepts, definitions, propositions that present a systematic view of a phenomena. Um, and then you want to see the relations, yeah, among all the variables involved, and you want to be able to explain what's going on in that situation, and you want to be able to predict, yeah, given the same circumstances, given the roughly the same variables, is this going to give me the same results? Yeah. So if we look at this definition given by Kerlinger and Lee, we can dissect this concept into three parts. The first one is that it is a set of propositions. Okay, so it contains definition and how the constructs are related. The second one is that it sets out the interrelations among the set of variables, the constructs. Yeah, and in doing so, it presents a systematic view of the phenomena. Okay, so we can understand how variable 1 or variable A is related to variable B, or what happened if we put variable A and B together and its effect on variable C, for example. Okay, so these are the interrelations that or constructs, yeah, in a theory. And then the third part is that the theory also explains the phenomena. It specifies which variables are related to which variables and how they are related. And they give us the ability to predict, yeah, certain variables, how are they good, how certain variables are going to behave if given different situation, or or if we can repeat this. For example, we test this on teenagers, or is this situation, this phenomena can be replicated, for example, in uh, younger children, yeah, things like that. Okay, so we want to see the predictive ability, yeah, of the theory. Okay, next. So the assumptions, assertions, predictions, and relationships, yeah, postulated by a theory become an intellectual base where you can do your research, yeah, and it can give meaning to future studies so that people can take from this theory and then project, for future studies. The theory also enables researchers to name what they observe, to understand, to explain relationships, and to make sense of human interactions. Okay, so this will help us increase our understanding, the body of knowledge in the field, and it will provide a basis for future theorization, research, and understanding. Okay, so if you come across a theory, it will help you not only understand, but it will also help you put your research in perspective in relation to what other people are saying, and also it will give you a predictive, what would happen if we do the same study in different situation. Like most of you, I think you know what happened in certain countries, but you want to see whether these variables are working in your own country. So we have seen a lot of research like that as well. Yeah. Okay, next. Okay, types of theories and types of research. Okay, theories may describe a phenomenon, and then it may explain certain relationships between and among phenomena. It may predict how one phenomenon behaves or impact another. Okay, so descriptive theories describe or classify specific dimensions or characteristics of groups, individuals, situation, events, whatever is your variable of your choosing, by summarizing commonalities found in observations. Okay, so this is under descriptive research studies. Explanatory theories specify relations among dimensions or characteristics of groups. Okay, so we are not looking at what variables are involved. We also want to see how one variable is explaining what is happening to another variable. Okay, and the third one, we also want to see the predictive ability, yeah, to predict the relationships, yeah, um, uh, between the dimension or even the characteristics of a phenomenon. Again, it depends on the variables that you choose. Okay, and these slightly different theories will have different types of research studies, yeah, whether descriptive, whether you're doing correlational research or you're doing experimental. Okay, next. Okay, now we come to theoretical framework because in your literature review, after you have done your readings and trying to make sense of what people are saying, what researchers have been done, you want to be able to understand this and develop. And how do you uh, put what you understand into a framework? Okay, so this is what theoretical framework. It comprises the theories expressed by experts in the field, based on um, previous research, previous data analysis, and interpretation of results. Yeah. So it is a structure that summarizes concepts and theories from previous researchers, um, which you synthesize and to help you come up with a theoretical background or basis for your data analysis. Okay, so that you can interpret the meaning contained in your research data. Because if you just do your research devoid of any theoretical framework, it's like you're doing in a vacuum. Okay, people cannot relate what you're doing to what is already established in the field. Okay, so this is the theoretical framework will help you connect your research with what is out there. Okay, it is a synthesis of the thoughts of experts in your field of research as they relate to your proposed research, as you understand those theories, and how you will use those theories to understand your research. Okay, so normally in chapter 2 of your thesis, um, you will have this theoretical framework, what people are saying, um, okay, what people are saying, and then how is your research going to contribute, to the body of knowledge or to the discourse of what people are already discussing or people are finding out. Okay, so this is why theoretical framework is very important. It puts you in a context, yeah, so your research does not exist in a vacuum. Okay, so the theoretical framework can be developed based on multiple theories that embody the findings of numerous investigations on how phenomena occur, and it provides a general representation of relationships, between things in a given phenomena. Okay. Okay. Next, Dr. Ismail. So why is it important? Because it serves two purposes. Yeah, we were talking about theoretical framework. Yeah, it serves two purposes. One is that it shows how your research fits into what is already known, what people are talking about, what people, the scholars are talking about, the items or the relationships or the variables that you are interested in. Okay, so it shows how your research fit in the jigsaw puzzle. Okay, and then secondly, it shows how your research makes a contribution. How can you contribute? Maybe a few researchers have identified the gap, and this is where your research comes in. You're trying to address some of the gaps that have been identified, or you notice when you read, um, you look at the thesis at the end of the thesis in chapter 6 or 7 or whatever, in the conclusion, yeah, chapter of a thesis, they normally have what we call, after they discuss all the findings and conclusion and whatnot, they will also have a section on further studies. Okay, further, or something, sometimes they call it implication for future studies or things like that, meaning that these are the items that they have not been able to address in their research but can be taken up by other researchers for future studies. Okay, so this is a clever way also for PhD students. Yeah, if for example you still, oh, I don't know what to study, I know I'm interested in urban design and impact on children or something like that, but you do not know where to focus. Then you can look at the previous thesis on something similar titles, and then at the end, look at the end at the conclusion, implication for future studies or further studies or something like that, so that you can get some idea. Oh, these are the things that was, these are the elements or areas that were not addressed in the research. Perhaps you can take up from there. Okay, so that's why at the end, I'm sure at the end of your thesis as well, maybe 3 or 4 years down the road, yeah, after you, when you do your conclusion um, chapter, you will also uh, raise this. Um, what are the things that you did not cover, or but should be researched in the future? Okay, so this is something that shows that you are contributing to the field, but you are also, because obviously you cannot address everything. Yeah, so you are given only 3 or 4 years. Okay, and then you need to be specific, and there are certain elements that you find out during your research, but it's not part of your earlier research anyway. Yeah, but you will use that and to suggest for other researchers, to conduct the research in the future. Okay, so that would be your contribution as well. To me, at least, that is a contribution as well, because when you realize that there are certain things that come up during your research, yeah, you just like, oh, I didn't think of this, but it came up in the research, in the conclusion, in the findings, maybe. So maybe other researchers would like to follow up on this. So it gives them ideas on how to go on and do some more research on the field. Okay. Okay, next. Okay, how do I develop theoretical framework? Okay, once you identify the theory you plan to examine in your study, it is helpful to explain it and discuss its adaptation to your study. How are you going to use, this theory in your study? Name the theory and then discuss the origins of the theory, who developed it, how it has been tested and applied. Is it relevant to your study? How is it relevant? Maybe sometimes it's not the whole theory, maybe parts of the theory that is relevant and you want to pursue more on that aspect. It can be done as well. And then identify your research question and hypothesis based on the theory. Okay. And using the theory, explain how you expect variables to relate or affect one another. And then explain why. Of course, this is part of your theoretical framework as well. Okay. Okay, next. And then what is the process? One is that you find the topic of interest. Of course, you do a literature review, lots and lots of literature review. This is not something that it can be done in 3 months and you are done. No. Literature review is actually ongoing, even as you do your research, even as you do your experiment, even as you are collecting your data, your reading on literature must go on. Okay, you might have completed your second chapter, it looks good, but it does not mean that you stop reading. Okay, you might find new things, so you will continue reading. Okay, so this is very important. You have to do a lot of readings. And then the third one, the findings. Okay, um, do you have contradicting results and no clear patterns, or um, is there a path that you can see, okay, or it is no, particular um, pattern that you can follow, okay? So you determine the perspectives from other angles, okay? If you're from literature, you can build your theoretical framework, you can see the gap and you can address it. That's good, yeah. But sometimes you do not have that early on, okay? So maybe you have to look from other angles, slightly different angles. So instead of for example, from the angle of the designers, how designers decide to do certain things, maybe you want to get the perspectives of the developers, of the construction workers, for example, yeah, things like that. So you might look at different angles, yeah, and then search for theories to approach research questions and other ways to study the phenomena. Okay, so actually, in your literature review, you are not only trying to understand what the previous research are about, but you also want to find out the correct methodology. Okay, so when you do your literature, look also at how people are conducting their studies, what variable they use, what approach, how many variables, uh, and how many samples, and things like that. So you want to look at the methodology as well, because it will help you in formulating your own methodology in how you approach your study. Okay, and then you organize existing or available theories that are explaining the phenomena. Okay, um, because sometimes they are contradicting, sometimes they are agreeing. Okay, that's fine. Okay, sometimes they are supporting, sometimes it's not totally within your theoretical framework, but it uh, just touch a little bit or things like that. So you want to organize which ones are the main or the core to your study. Okay, and you highlight your position or approach in the framework. So how or where does your research fit in? Yeah, in this whole framework. Okay. Next. So that was theoretical framework. So I know students. Um, a lot of them are confused about the difference between conceptual and theoretical frameworks. Yeah. So theoretical framework, basically you are doing literature review to understand what other people have done, what studies have been done, what are the findings, how variables are related, and so on and so forth. So you want to be able to find a gap in a theoretical framework, yeah, and then you want to be able to address that, okay, that gap. Okay, what are the conception framework? Basically, we want to know what are the concepts. So what concepts are you going to use in your research? And we want to see the representations of the phenomena to be studied, or what we call the building blocks. You know, this is what conception framework gives you. You want, okay, so now you have decided to do this study. So how do you go about doing that? Okay, so you need to have some foundation, theoretical framework, and then from there, how do you go? Okay, so in the theoretical framework, they give you I think most students would use a diagram, to represent the possible relationship between some of the theories, okay, and some of the concepts maybe, okay. So basically, a conceptual framework is the researcher's idea on how the research problem will have to be explored, okay. And this comes from the theoretical framework, from your understanding of the theoretical framework, and then it will give you the specific direction by which the researcher will go about, taking the study. Okay. Statistically speaking, the conceptual framework describes the relationship between specific variables identified in the study. Okay, sometimes it is called a research paradigm. Okay, so for example, you have identified, okay, this is the gap that I want to address in the theoretical framework. Okay, so from there, you can also identify the variables. Okay, these people are doing A, B, and C variables. I'm trying to do, B, C, and F variables, or for example, so you want to be able to identify how do you go about your research, what variables you're going to use. Okay, next. Okay, when searching for emergent theory, however, conceptual framework is important for situating the study. Okay, the author must demonstrate the importance of the study by defining the main ideas and the network of relationships between them. So you must be able to understand the relationship between the variables. Yeah. So a conceptual framework relates concepts, empirical research, and relevant theories to advance and systematize knowledge, about related concepts of issues or issues. Okay. So if you after you have done your literature review and you have developed your framework, you identify the gap, and now you should be able to identify, okay, what are my research objectives? What do I want to find out? Because the theory has helped you, the gap has helped you, the relationship between the variables from the previous studies and whatever, so those have helped you. So now, in a conceptual framework, you should be able to understand how these variables are related and how do you want to organize them. Okay, do you want to look at the satisfaction level of the tourists, the satisfaction level of the developers, or whatever, or you want to study the motivation, why people behave that way, why people relate A and B together, why, so those are what we call motivation. Yeah. So you need to be able to construct your variables, conceptually. Okay. Next. Okay, so the literature review, if I can differentiate between the two, if this again, this is not hard and fast rule. Yeah? Sometimes some studies do not have a very clear theoretical framework, especially if nobody has studied that before. Okay, so you do not have the theoretical framework to base on, to start your research. Okay, but in many cases, people have done a lot of studies. They have a theoretical framework, but you just want to add on, to the theories. You want to add on um, to the understanding of a phenomena, of a situation. Yeah. So you want to add on to that, okay? Okay, so literature review and conceptual theoretical frameworks, they have 5 functions. One is to build a foundation. Again, you cannot start from a vacuum. Yeah, you have to start from somewhere. Secondly, to demonstrate how a study advances knowledge. Okay, how you can contribute, basically. And C is to conceptualize the study. Um, how do you go about what approach you want to take? Yeah, what variables, many variables, what you want to study. Okay, and D is to assess research design and instrumentation. This is more detail in terms of the instruments that you want to use. You want not only physical instruments like they use in the labs, but also instruments for research like you want to use an observation list, you want to use questionnaire, things like that as well. Okay, so how, in other words, what do you need to identify, the tools that you need to identify to do your research. Okay, and then the E is to provide a reference point for interpretation of findings. If you start in a vacuum, cannot compare with what people have done in the past. So they should the literature review should give you a reference point, on how to interpret, to compare, to contrast, to add on, or to even contradict the previous findings. So that can all be done. Okay, so it provides a good reference point for your discussion. Okay, so if you are still not sure the difference between theoretical framework and conceptual framework, I have this tip for you. Okay, theoretical framework basically depicts existing theories and identify gap, meaning what has been done by previous research. But conceptual framework indicates what and how a phenomenon is to be understood and studied by you, in the future. Okay, so how do you approach this? Okay, so you are going, for example, you're going to look at how, um, for example, residential mobility. Okay, you want to see, you know, the factors that contribute to residential mobility, why people move from one house to the other. Maybe you will look at the price of the house, or the neighborhood qualities, or the facilities available and things like that. So there are different groups of variables that you want to study. Accessibility, neighborhood, and the financial part. That those are the factors that will help, or will help you to understand residential mobility. Okay, so what you would do in your conceptual framework is basically identify or read more on neighborhood quality, for example. Okay, and find what are the features that people are looking for and things like that. So you would put, accessibility, neighborhood quality, and financial. These are for just for example, the 3 factors, the 3 variables that you want to study, and to see their impact on residential mobility. The movement of people from one house to the other. Okay, so what you want to do is basically to after you have done all your readings and you understand how, there is a gap, whatever. So the theoretical framework is done. Now for the conceptual framework, you have to find out about all these 3 variables, and also residential mobility variables as well, and then try to put that in a diagram of how they are all related. Okay, so, and how do you approach this? Are you saying that neighborhood variables have implication on residential mobility? what are the variables and things like that. So do they have a positive relationship? Do they have a negative relationship? And so on. So you need to capture this in conceptual framework. Okay. So in other words, um, if we can simplify, we say theoretical framework is what has been done, previously by other researchers. And conceptual framework is actually what you want to do in your research, in your PhD, research here. So you want people to understand. Normally, conceptual framework will come at the end of chapter 2. Okay, after you have understand all the theories, all the previous studies, uh, discussions, and everything else, literature review chapter 2. Normally, conceptual framework will come at the end of chapter 2 or at the beginning of chapter 3. It depends, Basically, after understanding all the theoretical framework, so you are saying, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is the variables that I want to study. This is the approach that I want to take. Okay, so basically, the conceptual framework is telling the readers that this is what I want to do. Okay, so that is the conceptual framework. I hope that clears up